Welcome to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, the show where curiosity meets the open road. I'm your host Alasdair, and I invite you to join me as we explore the world through travel, adventure, nature, and the power of learning. Each episode we dive into inspiring stories from adventurers, educators, and global citizens. Whether it's in a classroom, on a local trail, or adventuring halfway across the world, there are stories to be told and lessons to share. So pack your curiosity, lace up your boots, and let's discover how the world can teach us all, one step, one story, one adventure at a time. Liz Kaltenhauser, affectionately nicknamed Fish as a child growing up in Minnesota, was drawn to the water from an early age. Her deep love for animals naturally led her to pursuing marine biology, a path that briefly took her to Florida. There, she quickly realized a stark disparity. Students in inland states like hers often lacked access to the same marine science opportunities as those on the coast. That realization sparked a passion for education that has shaped her career. After 7 years as an educator and animal care specialist at an aquarium, Liz continues to thrive in her true calling, bringing the magic of marine wildlife to children who live far from the ocean, empowering these students and planting seeds of wonder about the natural world. Well, Liz, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
I am doing fabulous. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing very well. It's been a busy day, but a good day, and we're going to end on a good note. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day, so thank you so much for being here.
Yay. Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, and how you got into what it is we're going to be talking about today.
Yes. So my name is Elizabeth. I go by Liz, though. Some of my friends call me Lizard, but that is because I have an animal background. And I
Right?
actually have worked with lizards in the past, so that's where I got my nickname. But I actually am currently located in Minnesota. I was born and raised here in the Twin Cities area. There's a little suburb of Minneapolis. And I always just grew up loving being outside, loving being in the water. There's just such a serene peace from being under the water that I have found. So I did everything I possibly could to be in the water as much as possible. Some of that included swimming. I did some competitive swimming once I joined middle school. And then as I continued, I actually found this sport called synchronized swimming. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't think it's a sport. It actually is. It's like running a marathon while holding your breath for half of it. It's genuinely difficult, but it did give me that thrill of being underwater, and I just loved it. And as I was in synchronized swimming and being in the water, I kind of slowly started to develop this love for the oceans and develop an ecosystem that I have actually never seen, and I didn't get to see until I was a freshman in high school when we went to California. And even then I couldn't even swim in it because California waters, it's very cold. The Pacific Ocean is actually very cold. And so
Right?
it really is. And so I didn't really get an opportunity to actually be in the ocean until my sophomore year of high school, when I was offered a opportunity to get my scuba certification and
Right?
go on a trip with some other high school students. And it was a pretty expensive trip, but 1000% worth it. We got to get scuba certified, and then we developed our skills here during the summer. And then for 1 week we got to go out to the Grand Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman
Wow.
specifically. Yeah.
That's a
So
good
we
place to
call
start. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could
Yes.
say that my open water diving experience, like my first ever certification, they call it like a spoiled diver, when you get to kind of experience one of the best places to scuba dive in your first go around. And it was a great opportunity. I learned so much, and that's when it hit me that this is what I wanted to do, like, forever.
Right?
And it was a little scary at first too, though, when you're diving in such a large body of water. I had, grown up on lakes, and so this ocean was this massive thing that, you know, plummeted to depths up to 35,000 feet in some areas, and you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna go dive to the bottom, like, okay.
Right.
And I found that my first ever dive I did, I actually got a close hand experience with what could go wrong in scuba diving
Really,
when
I'd love
I
to hear
actually,
more
yeah.
about that. Yes.
So when you learn about scuba diving, you learn about the ocean, you learn about PSI, pressure per square inch, right? And we talk about that a lot with like airplanes. If you go up in an airplane, you're going to start feeling that pressure on your ears, and so they naturally, as we call they pop your ears. And so when you are diving into the depths of the ocean, even if you're like 20 feet under the surface, you're actually going to plug your nose and you're going to equalize your ears. This is normal for scuba diving. And so what they don't tell you though is your first time equalizing your ears doesn't work very well. And uh, it's especially difficult if you never had to experience that kind of depth before. Even the only one time I had been on a plane, so my ears were not very suited for this kind of experience. So there I am
Right.
trying to go down. Oh, there's some pain in my ear. Okay, I'm gonna come back up, re-equalize, repressurize my ears, then go back down. It was still causing me so many issues. I was in a lot of pain. And so I was like, maybe this is normal and I just have to get over it. And so I spent the rest of my dive in immense ear pain, only then to find out like 5 years later when I get my ears checked just to make sure, I can hear and everything
Of
as a
course.
dive physical, for a job with diving. And one of the tubes in my ears had shriveled up from the pressure in the ocean, which was why I was feeling all of that pain. So I can still hear, but now I'm just very loud.
Right.
And yeah,
Wow. So it's left some permanent damage, but a permanent
yeah,
lasting effect. Yeah.
just a little bit. But you know what? I still do it. I currently,
Right.
so kind of, I went on a little bit of a tangent. I do that on times, but
This is
um
the perfect scenario for it. The
yay.
perfect place.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yes.
Awesome. So, going back a little bit more to my experiences after doing scuba diving and knowing this is what I want to do, I then started to pursue marine science and knowing I really couldn't do that in Minnesota. So, I ended up packing everything up, going to Florida, going to school, and I didn't do very well with the school stuff, like the book smarts. Wasn't
Right.
very good at it. They put me on academic probation, and I said, you know what? It's not worth the $30,000 a year for me to do this. So I went back home and finished my degree online in biology
Mm-hmm.
and environmental science. And then worked at the local aquarium for a little bit longer before making that permanent leap to Florida. And I lived in Tampa and I worked with fish and I got that marine science experience. I had the degree. I was living what I dreamed I wanted, since I was little. I was working with fish. I was living by the beach. It was perfect. But what they
Right.
don't tell you is what do you do after you accomplish that dream and then you realize that's not what that's not what you that's what you thought you wanted, but
Of
then you
course.
realize after you do it for a while it's not fulfilling you.
Mm-hmm.
And that could also be said about the pay too, because I was in the midst of COVID only working half the amount of hours normally, just going in to make sure the animals are fed and then leaving. So you're getting $13 an hour for 4 hours, or sorry, 4 hours a day. So
Right.
16 hours a week. And it became really difficult to sustain that. And so I had to make that difficult decision for my financial well being to
Mm-hmm.
move home back to Minnesota. And I kind of, you know, tail between the dog's legs, kind of ran back to Minnesota to regroup a little bit. But I still got to spend a lot of time outside. I got to do a lot of diving. I still dive to this day. And I am now a part time diver at my local aquarium. So I'm still diving and I still get to go out and do
Good.
scuba cleanups and all of that stuff out in the lakes, and it's really, really rewarding. But I realized that my experience is very similar to other people's experiences when it comes to being in a landlocked state. Basically, realizing that I had to leave my favorite place, which is my home, to go
Mhm.
to another half of my soul, which is the ocean. I had to travel and move away from the other half of my soul to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And I don't think that that should be the case. And so I founded a nonprofit. And this is recently, like all of our paperwork just got put in April. So we're hitting
Right.
the ground running. It's very new. And what we're trying to accomplish is taking that ocean and bringing it closer to students in these landlocked states. Because I had the privilege to be able to, pay for a $3,000 trip, get the $600 scuba certifications, get a job at one of the only aquariums in my state, as well as work with animals at that aquarium as well. So there's just few opportunities here, and there's even fewer when it comes to other environmental conservation groups as well, because most of those are notoriously difficult to get into, specifically here in Minnesota. And so the goal of our nonprofit is to be able to give students that opportunity without having to worry about the paycheck, without having to worry about the pay of that program, like how much it would cost, basically. And
Right.
so one of our big projects that we're currently working on, that we're fundraising for, is a live stream scuba dive. So we have divers go out in Florida and they would do a live stream workshop where they're talking to the camera. And on the other end of that camera are students from landlocked states who have, one, never seen the ocean, two, don't have the opportunities to even visit an aquarium to get that opportunity, and three, be able to ask questions to that diver and get real time results and real time answers. So this is kind of the
Wow.
big project, and it's just trying to give that experience and give that ecosystem to the students and open up their world a little bit, if that makes any sense.
It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. This is a fascinating story, and I've got so many questions.
I'm
So I
sorry.
think no, 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 this is wonderful. I think I'm gonna go kind of just almost chronologically. I will say, first of all, it's a bit of a coincidence that you're from Minnesota, because it was just last week, I think, that I saw that Minnesota had cracked the top 10 for the world's happiest cities to live in the world. And it was one
Yeah.
of the first American cities, if not the first American city to do it. And it was really not water related, but parks, cycle paths, outdoor activities, despite it getting pretty cold in the winter.
Yes.
I've only had a layover in Minnesota. I've been all around it, but never just a layover at your airport in Minneapolis. Um, but it does seem kind of like an outdoorsy place. There
It
is a
it
lot to
really
do.
is. Yes. I mean, we're also just we're like a different breed of person. A lot of people, we have that iconic saying of Minnesota nice, which, sometimes a lot of us Minnesotans are like, is it niceness or is it passive aggressiveness? Either way though, like I would, if I could give my kidney to my neighbor because I love my neighbor, I would. We have that kind of mentality, but we're the land of 10,000 lakes. And even that, we're being Minnesota nice. It's not really 10,000 lakes. It's actually over 1,100 or 11,000 lakes. That's, and
Right.
Wisconsin is still trying to argue that they have more, but they call ponds lakes. So I don't
So
think
who's right and who's wrong here? That's really
we
the
have this
thing.
kind of like friendship, sibling rivalry kind of with Wisconsin a little bit. But with that much shoreline, I mean, we spend more time outside than we do inside. Even in the middle of, -40-degree weather, in the cold and the snow, you're still finding kids going outside to play in the snow and going skiing. We have so many ski hills here, which is kind of crazy considering we're not mountainous at all. We have more plains than we do mountains.
Right.
And we still have plenty of hills though that we go skiing. I mean, it's part of our whole regiment with schools. is when I was in elementary school, we would go sledding. We would go to Valley Fair, which is just kind of like, our Six Flags. So it's just roller coasters and stuff. We would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then in middle school, that's when you start, you do overnights at the zoo. You do you do more like iconic type of stuff where you go. We had this thing where we go camping for a week in the summer. And then we also had a winter retreat as well, where you go camping in the winter, but like inside a cabin. And then in high school, I got to go scuba diving. So like even the schools, they do a really good job at promoting being outside, which is really awesome. It's just unfortunate that when you spend all this time outside, there is not that much education about what you're seeing and how you can protect it. And that's kind of where we're kind of bridging that gap a little bit.
Well, that's a wonderful gap to bridge. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Something that needs to be done. I always think that it's an interesting thing about the United States is, sometimes I forget how big it is here. I'd be curious to know if you happen to know the number. If kids go outside during school for recess, what's the kind of cutoff temperature that they're not allowed
Ooh.
to go out?
Yeah. So when it's in Minnesota specifically, we don't really get really hot days during our school years because we're ending in, beginning of June is usually when we stop. And this is just Minnesota. I know when I lived in Florida, my friend was a teacher there and they end
Hmm.
in like mid-May. And so because we're ending around there, you might see, a couple 80-degree weather days in Minnesota for recess. But when it comes to the cold, that's when you start really having to kind of cut that recess time. And my dad actually used to be a recess monitor for my elementary school way back in the day. So
Right.
I'm a little familiar with the cutoff. I believe it has to be below 0 is when we usually say, okay, we have to look at it. However, if it's been really cold, like -10, -20 with the wind chill, obviously, so the wind is blowing and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden you get negative like 1 or 2 degrees and no wind, yeah, the kids could go outside and play. We
See,
just, yeah, we monitor the weather a lot here, and surprisingly our weather can be notoriously uh just radically changing. And I think this is, predominantly similar with other United States as well, like other US states as well. I know Florida was like that too, but you could have one day where it's, -40, and then I've seen this where it's -40 one day and then the next day it's like 32 degrees. Then the next day is like 70 degrees and then the next day again it dips way below under freezing again.
right.
Okay. Someone tell me if I can take my shorts out or not because this is too
Right.
much.
Make up your mind. We've had a few of those kind of weekends or 3 or 4 days where it's been a 50
Yeah.
degree, 60-degree swing. Um,
Oh my gosh.
I live just north of Dallas, and we've got, people here from all over the world, of course, but all over the states. And northerners like my dear wife will sometimes scoff at the fact that it's a 32-degree cutoff here. It's to anything
Oh,
below 32 degrees, the kids don't go outside. They're
32?
not hard. They're Yeah, exactly. They're not hardened Minnesotans. So
Yeah,
it's
well,
just
in
it's just so
32, we're
different.
out in shorts, in the
Right,
wintertime.
right.
Yeah,
It's a different world straight up the road. It's so interesting to me. Just I
yeah,
could hop in my car and just not really all that far away. It's a completely different mentality,
yeah,
which I
and
find
I mean,
interesting.
it can you can change though pretty quick too. Like I wouldn't say that this is like the hardiness of Minnesotans or even like Alaskans I know are the same, but
Hmm.
it doesn't it it doesn't happen over years and years and years. I went to Florida and I only lived there for 3 years. And by my second year, if it had dipped below 50 degrees, I had to take out my winter coat because I was getting cold. And so and
Right.
I was getting a lot of heat from people back home. They were very very mad at me for pulling out my puffy coat in 50 degrees when it was clearly under 20 degrees back home, but it was,
Right.
it's part of it.
They were teasing you rightly, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, talk to me a little bit more about this first time. Tell me if I'm right here. The first time you, other than California, when you got your feet in the ocean, you got in the ocean. It was in the Caymans. Is that correct
Yes.
with the scuba? I'm curious as
Yes.
to the emotions of that because it sounds to me like
Oh.
that was probably something you had spent most of your life gearing towards that moment. So, how did that feel to actually have that come true?
Well, see, so the Grand Cayman is a 22-mile island. The first time I saw the ocean I got a window seat, so in the airline in the plane, I
Hmm.
you come down and you don't see the runway. It just looks like you're going straight into the ocean. So there was some fear there. Um but I saw the ocean. I got off the plane and the ocean's right there and you just smell the air. And even to this day, if I even get a little bit of that smell from either my time in Florida or in the Cayman Islands, if I smell that same smell, it literally like it makes me cry. It's such an emotional experience to just know that that's where you know you belong, but at the same time Minnesota is your home and you don't want to leave it. It's strange. You feel very torn, but the first time I got into the ocean, I had a lot of fear running through me because I'm in my full gear. This is the first time I'm diving. I know I have to take my mask off underwater. I know I have to take out my only thing that I'm able to breathe underwater because we have to test all of those skills to make sure that you know what you're doing. And so there was a lot of fear in me to the point where I don't even think I was focused on being actually in the ocean. I do remember the taste because being in freshwater, obviously, if you get water up your nose, it's not really going to hurt as bad as if you get the salt water up your nose. So
Of course.
I remember feeling the salt water in my mouth for the first time and wanting to vomit and because it was so salty and I was like, "Oh, I forgot this is an ocean." But I remember
Right.
that first feeling of getting all of the gear stuff out of the way, getting comfortable, being underwater and just being able to see a coral reef for the first time, seeing my first shark underwater and seeing a sea turtle for the first time and just feeling at such peace and knowing that, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. And
Isn't that a
um
great feeling?
it's so nice. And even when I dive in the tanks at the aquarium, because I do that still too. I'm diving tomorrow actually, and it's still just a very triggering experience and it makes me feel just so like at peace and then also knowing that this is what I'm meant to be doing and knowing that just gives me enough joy to just keep going even though it's only part-time, right? So you're not getting a lot of financial gain from it, but your mental health is much better. So kind of like balances out for me a little bit.
It's interesting. You're the second guest in a row who has brought up smell and immediately taking them
Mm,
back somewhere. Be interesting
yes.
to see these conversations that I have if this turns out to be a trend. Um, so that's super
Yeah.
interesting. Now, other than dipping my feet in the ocean and things at a beach, I've only really been in the ocean or in the water once. We went out on a boat in Florida and dived off the boat and putted around and there was dolphins jumping around
Aw.
and I got
Yeah.
face full of the salt water and that was that'll take you back the first time that you get that
Yeah.
and like I loved it, like it's a great time. Unfortunately, I don't know what I would have done differently, but I'm pretty short-sighted, so I need my glasses. So I was constantly trying to figure out if no glasses but the mask was better or glasses. And I wish I'd had some kind of prescription goggles. I don't know. It would have been
Yeah.
cool to have the full experience. And but I was thinking about this when you volunteered your time to come on. Like I think I've got a healthy fear of the ocean. I'm not terrified. I would jump in it again, in the right in the right circumstances with the right people around me. I'd get back in it. But how do you help people who maybe have a healthy fear of just getting in the water in general? Because that must be quite a
It's
common thing.
Oh, yes, it's hard. And, movies don't help. Cinema doesn't help because you've got Jaws. Jaws is the one thing. And my mom blames my marine science background on this experience where she went to Disney and did the Jaws ride while she was, only several weeks pregnant with me. So she didn't even know. So she went on Jaws and it scared her to the point where she literally like peed her pants.
Right.
Sorry, mom, if you're listening, I
Right.
apologize, but it had to be said. And she blames my love of sharks and my marine science background on that one experience, which I find kind of funny. But
Right.
and so people have a genuine fear, but only because they're basing their fear off of things that aren't normally going to happen. If you jump in the ocean, and I don't want to scare more people, but if you jump in the ocean, odds are 70% of the time there is a shark within at least 20 to 30 feet from you. And this is because they're just checking you out, they're just looking you over, and then they go on their way. Like more often than not, you're just fine swimming in the ocean if you mind your own business. You still have to be, understanding of your environment like we would go anywhere. If you go hiking, if you go kayaking, canoeing, anytime you're out in the wild, you should always be aware of your surroundings. And the ocean is no
Right.
different. But at the same time, if you go hiking, they got bears out there. There's, coyotes. I'm terrified of running into a bear. I would love to see one, but I'm terrified of bears and mountain lions. I'm also very scared of, but I still go hiking because that's an experience and the odds of me running into one are low. And if I do, I know how to protect myself. I know what I'm supposed to be doing in that situation. And I take that time to research and understand. So, our job when we take students or we take adults, because we have plenty of adults that go into the ocean and they're terrified. What we do is we just give them that opportunity to research what they're most terrified of and how to counteract that. Because if they'll feel more at peace knowing what they're supposed to do in a situation, if a shark approaches, or some people are afraid of like jellyfish because you can't see them. And I have a pretty
Right.
healthy fear of jellyfish myself because I have been stung. And it's not a pleasant experience, but everybody has a different pain tolerance too. So I've picked jellyfish up and have had nothing happen to me before, depending on the type of jelly. So what we do is we just focus on that education aspect, and most of the time people are predominantly better about going into the ocean and knowing that they're not alone too. So with those smaller kids, being there and actually physically touching them on their shoulders, holding their hands, actually linking arms to actually support them really helps them out too, knowing that they're not alone. If something comes up to you, it's going to come up to me too. and I'm
Right.
the type of person for my clients or whoever I'm with, I'm the person who's jumping right in front for you. So no worries there. But I mean, not to like bring it up, but I have gotten bit by a shark, not in the wild. I was feeding a shark and he bit down on my foot because I had dropped the tongs and I went over because I worked at an aquarium in Florida, and he got my shoe. And I thought it was so funny, even though I was in a lot of pain. I was complete. I was like, finally, I got bit by a shark. I have a story now. And I feel like that's kind of the case with a lot of marine scientists too, is they're very much like, oh, if something bites me, it's my fault. So
That's so interesting. Yeah, I suppose so. You can actually say I've been bitten by a shark when somebody brings up
yes.
that fear, and you have
Yeah.
some. You're bona fide. You've actually been there. You've done it. So
Yeah,
that's
it to
fantastic.
be fair, I won't lie here. It wasn't like it was a great white or anything, you guys. It was
Right.
just it was a nurse shark. So their teeth are not designed for sharp, but they are designed for crushing. So I was a little scared for the my bones and my toes, but everything was fine. And this could also turn into a Croc advertisement because I was wearing my Crocs and my Crocs protected my foot from any kinds of broken toes. So Crocs are worth the money.
Well, when we post this, we'll have to tag Crocs and just see what
Yes.
happens. Yes,
Who
that needs to
knows?
be done. Now, I
Yeah.
love what you told us about Wave and being the nonprofit and the idea of, in my head, I kind of imagine you're bringing the experience to the kids rather than,
Yes.
having to finance taking the kids to the experience. And I love that,
Yeah.
just opening all these kids' eyes and ears and, to this world they wouldn't get to experience. Could you kind of just talk us through how do you go about forming a nonprofit, and then what do you hope the future holds for Wave down the line? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years away.
Yeah. You've opened the floodgates here, my guy, because
Right.
my the nonprofit has it has some hefty goals. But I am never one to shy away from a goal. My brother always likes to joke that I'm a dreamer and I have all these things I want to do and I have to choose one. Nay, nay, I say I can do all of them because
I
why?
like that attitude.
Um, and so when it comes to setting up a nonprofit, I actually went through a company called LegalZoom and they were able
Hmm.
to assist me. A lot of people use LegalZoom. They're very nice. They understand what they're supposed to be doing and they were able to kind of help me a little bit more with those more harder aspects like an articles of incorporation, actually sending in paperwork, figuring out what forms I need to fill out. And then the hardest part was just waiting for the tax exemption. The tax exemption, which I did pay extra for LegalZoom to go and actually, make the application for us and send it into the IRS. But it took, I think, 4 or 5 months. Well, no, I guess it hasn't been 4 or 5 months. It feels like it's been 4 or 5 months. I think because it was April 5th when we turned everything in, and I heard back 2 weeks ago. So I guess it's only really been like 3 months, but it feels longer because we're trying to do all this stuff in the process. But the tax exemption status allows a nonprofit to be able to get donations and
Hmm.
grants and everything like that. And people who donate get that tax write off. So if you donate your clothes to Goodwill because you're donating clothing, you get that little slip for tax exemption if you want. Most people don't use it, but I know some who do, and it's very similar. So the nonprofit, like for me, was the way to go. I actually originally had it as an LLC, and it was called Dive One, which was in honor of the Dive One MN company that took us scuba diving for the first time in high school. I knew the owner
Right.
who shut it down after COVID. He had retired. I asked his permission to start it up again. He said absolutely. And then halfway through, it was only like 2 years, I realized that this is not what I wanted. This is not, I didn't want to do trips for $6,000. I wanted students to have this opportunity to do these things for as little to no money as possible. So that's why I kind of took the same idea as Dive One and kind of repurposed it into this nonprofit. And now, we are focused a lot on education, but WAVE stands for something. It stands for four different values of what our mission is. The W being wildlife and welfare. We do have one of our board members, as well as myself, who have worked in zoos and aquariums, as well as we have actually started our own podcast based on our experience in animal welfare. And then we also have very strong opinions about animals that are pets and trying to help people understand exotic pet industry, help promote better standards and help promote shipping but animals better and aquaculture and all these other things. So the W is the wildlife and welfare, whereas the A is action and advocacy, promoting people to get involved in the community um, for the environment. So things like, gardening and community gardens that help support communities, but then also get kids out into the wild and get those educational experiences. We've got V, which is the vision and innovation. One of our goals within the next 5 to 10 years I don't want to say 1 to 2 years because though I love the idea, the grant funding is going to be really hard and it's going to be really hard to
Hmm.
find fundraising opportunities for this. But we want to develop a virtual reality headset game that is focused on the just being in nature. We want it to be wildlife and conservation themed so students can tag great white sharks in this game. We want it to be able to, they can skydive out of a plane and release tree seeds and, help support monarch butterflies by going out and counting them or picking them up off the ground and putting them on the tree. Just these little things that they can learn about that they can do themselves in nature or in a career, but in a game first. It's more of a simulation. So, utilizing technology to get people closer to nature is a huge thing, especially right now with technology being the way it is. And it's just going to continue to grow. So, that's what our V stands for. And then, of course, you've got E, which is the education aspect, which we've been talking a lot about already.
I love it. I mean, it just sounds like the whole premise, if I understand this
Mhm.
right, is while you would love to take kids to Grand Cayman, to Florida, to this, to that, you're finding new and exciting ways of bringing this all to them. And
Yes.
I just imagine children who are going to experience this in 30 years' time sitting down doing a podcast interview with somebody saying, I was just a kid in Minnesota, I'd never been to the ocean, and then I put on this headset and that changed the course of my life. And I would imagine, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if that happened for one child, everything is worth it.
Yeah, just like you saying it makes me want to cry because it's just like that's the whole mission is, we're just such a wholesome, wholesome people here. And I just, there's a lot of people, even one of our board members, they sparked one of the best quotes I have heard in a while. And it's kind of our mission statement at this point, which is they specifically said, I don't want to move from my favorite place to work in my favorite niche. And I was like, ooh, that's a good
Right.
one.
That
So,
hits home. Yes.
yeah. So, one of our big, big ticket items, and I'm still working on the phasing for it because the phasing has to be very specific when it comes to finding the right fundraising and the right grant opportunities. But the goal is to have our own institute one day. This is the first time I'm talking about it in public. Only because I work for an aquarium and I don't want them to feel like I'm competing with them, but
Of
it
course.
will have an aquarium that will double as a sanctuary, an adoption center. It's going to be an institute for animals, basically, but research as well, giving students that opportunity from all over any of the 17 landlocked states that we have in the US and giving them an opportunity to come inland and study the ocean, study coral restoration practices, help with coral breeding, help with aquaculture breeding, and help with veterinarian research and all of this other kinds of animal stuff while giving them an opportunity to just be able to explore a new field of research and a new field entirely, maybe for them, without having to travel long, long distances. And I think that's one of the big things the Institute wants to tackle is how to get kids the experience without a huge price tag. Even if you do an internship, I mean, I did an internship 3 hours north of me, so I got super lucky. But a lot of my friends that are in the aquarium industry, they had to travel to the Georgia aquarium, and that because that's the biggest one. And when you get
Right.
there, you get to, you get 40 hours unpaid, no housing. How are you going to pay for your food? How are you going to get there? How are you going to find parking? Because parking is paid there, and all these different things. And so the goal of the Institute is to provide that space. If students at other colleges want to come and do research at the Institute, great. Come on over. We'll give you housing. We'll give you a stipend. And if you need help with we'll find someone to take you home if you need it. Like
Right.
we're too nice. We're too nice. We can't just leave you here. So the idea is to kind of create a little campus, basically, and that's why we're calling it an institute. So yes, the aquarium will fund the experience. It'll fund the research. It'll fund the interns and people coming outside doing research at our facility. It's less of an aquarium and more of an institute. So yeah, I mean,
Right. It
that's
just sounds fascinating. I mean, I've just got
yeah,
this picture in my head of this large community that gets formed where, unfortunately, it always comes down to money, but you're
yep,
providing avenues and ways for, hopefully, for people to have, yeah, to access things they otherwise wouldn't have been able to before, and that just is terribly
yeah.
exciting.
I know, and I
Yeah.
really want to do it now, but money,
Right.
money,
Always
and
the issue. Yes.
I mean, this is going to be a upwards of. I think we priced it out to about $50 million.
All right, just a little bit of money, just a bit.
Just a little. So, but
Right.
we're finding that phasing it out over these next 10 years is going to be the easiest. So phase one, just surveying people, finding out what the cost analysis would be, the ROI would be, and kind of working towards finding out if we can even accomplish this in Minnesota by just, doing basic surveys, just doing that. Then phase two is, the land. Can we get the land? If we can get the
Right.
land and we can survey the land and do all of our environmental work on the land, make sure everything is up to code, everything is environmentally friendly because we're big on that.
Of course. Of
um,
course.
then you've got the phase three, which is actually, the building, and you've got phase four, which is activities and the housing and, the extra stuff. But yeah, so we're finding the phasing method is working, but it's also just finding those companies and working with local government to be able to assist with that. And thankfully, we do live in a state like Minnesota where we do have a little bit more access to government funding because I know right now with everything going on and there's few opportunities for environmental things to get funding right now, especially because of what we're specifically targeting, which is students that would be necessarily underrepresented in STEM, so minority students or students
Right.
who come from a poor economic background. Because it's unfortunate, but because of all of these different topics, it's posing to the federal government like we're not going to get much money from them. So finding other companies to kind of support is what we're focused on, and then trying to build as much income from products as much as we can.
Right. Of
So
course.
yeah,
Merchandise and all of that.
yep.
There's just so many parallels. I don't know anything about this world, which is part of the reason I'm super excited we connected. But when we take students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, like immigrant children, things like that, out to cabins, to when they go to we go on science camp for a few days. It just opens their world up to things they've never
Yeah,
seen before.
it's
And
amazing.
it just warms my heart. So it's different, yet
Yeah,
it's the same, and I kind of love that. Um,
100%.
a- as we kind of wrap this up, I've got three questions I would like to ask you. Um, First one is, if you could go scuba diving with anybody in the world, dead or alive, anybody in the world, you might know them, you might not. Who would it be?
Oh man, there's a couple options here. I am a huge Steve Irwin fan. I think diving with the infamous Steve Irwin would always be, or even his son Robert and Bindi
Hmm.
would be just as exciting to go diving. And then there's also this one person, and she is by far one of the biggest influences in the marine science community. Her name is Sylvia Earle. They even have a nickname for her called Her Deepness. That's literally what they call her. Very fancy, I know. And
Right.
she's the first woman to walk across the seafloor for a longer distance. And she also stayed in a lab underwater for I think like a month or two, something like for a long time. She stayed underwater doing research. And she still dives. I think she's in her upper 80s. She's still diving.
Goodness.
Just hearing from her what she thinks about diving and what she thinks about the oceans, and even just having a conversation with her about diving, I would be totally okay with. But yeah,
Right. You wouldn't even have to get in the water. Yeah.
I wouldn't. I would be able to feel what it's like diving just from her speaking about it. That's how amazing she is. She's a huge influence on a lot of marine scientists, specifically women, because she kind of opened those doors for a lot of women to join marine science, which is still a very like man dominated kind of field, but we're slowly changing that dynamic. But yeah, it's because of her that women kind of little girls got really excited about marine biology.
I love that. I love that. Second question I have for you. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
um, I mean, oh, that's a great one. I would say do it scared, do it sooner. And I think that kind of because we get scared so easily to try something new, and then we just you get kind of wrapped up in your fear, and then you just don't do it. I mean, how long did it take you to decide you wanted to do a podcast, and then how much
Right.
time in between you deciding podcast and actually getting it up and running, right? So we
Right.
kind of sometimes get scared. Like I didn't start a business until 20, I was like 28, 27 years old, but I had the idea well before that. I think I was maybe 23 or 24 when I first knew I wanted to be a marine scientist, but an entrepreneur in the field of marine
Right.
science. And I didn't do anything about it because I was scared and I didn't know where to start. And, a couple Google questions answered later, boom, here we are. So I would just say it's okay to be afraid, but you have to at least try, because failure is okay. Failure just means it shines a light on something that could work the next time. So I would say do it afraid and do it sooner.
I love that. Good advice for us all. And kind of tied into that, my last question this evening for you is, what does success mean to you, and how do you think that definition of success has evolved or changed over the years?
I would have said, 10 years ago that the goal was money, was to be rich and to be free, because financially I am still not in a good place. I wasn't raised on learning about finances and learning about the value of money. So I made a lot of horrible mistakes in my life, and I'm still paying for those mistakes. And so finances is a huge one for me to feel free. However, now I view that freedom differently. Yes, finances are going to tie you down, but what freedom looks like to me is being able to escape my 9 to 5. It's able to do my nonprofit full time and be able to be free on a Tuesday afternoon. And
Yes.
but I really want to do this nonprofit because the institute is my dream. That's where this idea started, was the institute. And so the nonprofit is like the way to get there, but it's also about being able to provide students that opportunity to just do what they want to do. I always have such a love. I got to help a student with one of her projects in her senior year, where she had to kind of do an internship basically with one like a company. And she said, well, your company is the only company that's doing this kind of stuff that I want to do. Can I intern with you? And I was like, number one, absolutely. Number two, it's sad that I'm the only company here that's doing it, but okay. And when I saw her presentation, that's when I knew. That's what I knew what success looked like, was knowing that I may not have succeeded in being a marine scientist, but knowing she's going to, because I helped her get there. Oh my gosh. That's
That's it.
that's that's it for me. And just being an inspiration to other students, in that, just that aspect, knowing that they can do whatever they want to do. Nothing is tying you down. And I think that's really important. Like, I don't care where you're from. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care I don't even care what skin color you are. If it it's about what you want to do, you can do it. And I'm going to help you get there because that's all I really care about.
I
And
love it.
obviously a lot of environmental nonprofits, they focus a lot on conservation and wildlife. And obviously that is 100% important, 1000% important. But at the same time, you can care for everyone else, but who's going to care for that other next generation? That next generation of students who's going to take your spot. If they don't care, what was the point of starting the nonprofit? There was no point, because you're
Yeah.
not passing along your education, you're not passing along your love for wildlife, for nature, for being outside, doing outside activities. So then what was the point? So it's a lot about passing on that environmental love and that nature love to the students.
It's again, I'm doing this podcast and I've talked to several different people as we're just getting started, and there's so many parallels between very different stories, and I love it. And what you're saying just rings true of me. Something that I've been thinking about a lot is everything I do. So I'm in education, and today was actually my last day in K-12 education. After 12 years, I'm
Oh man.
moving on to
Oh.
staying in public education, but moving on to something exciting. Um, but everything I do is really just taking information and trying to pass it on to the next generation. I could
Mm,
learn everything there is to know about whatever it might be, but if I don't pass that on with some excitement and enthusiasm and wonder, what's the point? There
yeah.
literally is no point to it. So if I can inspire and get kids' minds thinking about a world that perhaps they don't know, or make them
Mm,
realize that they can do things that they didn't realize were a possibility, that's what it's all about. And everything
absolutely.
else, all the noise, just kind of fritters away at the side.
Yeah,
And it just sounds very similar to what you're doing up
absolutely.
there. Now, if
Yes.
people want to find you online, learn about you, learn about Wave, where can they find you? What's the thing to do?
They can visit our website, www.thewavecoalition.org. Very, very standard, basic website. We are on all major platforms except for Twitter, which is now X. I never really figured that one out, so I just said, no, it's fine.
Yep.
Surprisingly, we do have a TikTok account.
Right.
So you can definitely check that one out. TikTok we use more for educational purposes, as well as Instagram. It's just Wave or Wave Coalition. And on both platforms, we do a lot of animal and wildlife education. So even if you're just following us, you're still going to learn something new and exciting every day, because we do Deep Dive Monday where we talk about something a little bit more in depth. Fish Fact Friday, duh, because it's, Fish Fact Friday. It's always been Fish Fact Friday.
As it should be. As it should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every day you can show up and kind of learn a little bit more about not only our mission, but a little bit more about wildlife.
I love that. And if people have questions for you directly, they want to learn more, maybe
Oh,
somebody wants to donate, can they reach you through Wave,
the
or is there a
web.
better way?
Yep.
Through, yep.
Any of the platforms I run, except I do have someone who runs the Instagram account, but she is also a board member. We have
Perfect.
five of us in total. So if you can't get a hold of me, they're there. But I run all of the other platforms. So any platform would work to get a hold of me. You can even text me. I'm like really easily to text. My phone number is the Wave phone number. So just call or text me and I will get back to you.
Perfect. I love it. And one of the reasons I was very excited to have you on was quite simply, I live in North Texas, which is, I don't really want to make up a number, but several hundred miles from the coast. So it's
Mm.
quite far. And I swear there's times I drive through small towns up here. There's one in my town, at least one, and it's just a scuba diving shop. And it's this thing I know nothing about, and I wonder who in the world goes in this place. Like, nothing obviously against scuba diving, but you would expect to see that lining the coast of Florida or up and down, California or
Yes,
something. And it's
they
just a
are
world I
everywhere.
know nothing about. They are everywhere. You see that very distinctive sign. And just this conversation, you've opened my eyes up to this world, and you've certainly inspired me, and I know you'll have been inspiring to others. So I really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. It was fun to be here and just talk about it and open your eyes. Maybe you'll get scuba certified one day.
Maybe if I do, I'm going to be in touch. You better believe it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll go diving
Well,
sometime.
Liz,
Anybody who wants to go diving.
yeah, yeah. I've got the feeling it's not the thing you do once. If you do it once, you're in.
You're in.
And
You're in it
that's kind of
forever.
perfect. That's the
Yeah.
way it should be. Well, Liz Kaltenhauser, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you again to this week's guest, and I hope today's episode was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and perhaps even inspired your next adventure. If you did enjoy the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find more information at theoutdoorseyeducator.com or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast.